nursing a single cup of Earl Grey in Chicago's most opulent hotel, Linda Mitchell was trying to pretend just for an hour that her life as a broke graphic designer wasn't falling apart. Her desire to remain invisible vanished, however, when the city's most feared woman sat across from her and slid a 3-carat yellow diamond across the table. The ultimatum was whispered, but absolute. Pretend you're my son's fiancée, or we both die tonight. Far from a fairy tale about a prince saving a pauper, this is the story of how Linda became the property of Alessio Scarlatti, and how a simple lie became the deadliest truth of all. The rain in Chicago didn't wash things clean, it just made the grime slicker. Linda Mitchell sat in the corner of the Gilded Leaf, a tea room inside the Drake Hotel that smelled of old money and lavender. She didn't belong here. Her coat draped over the back of the velvet chair was from a thrift store in Wicker Park, and the soles of her boots were worn thin. She had spent her last $20 on a pot of Earl Grey and a single scone, a ritual she performed every year on the anniversary of the day her father walked out. It was a reminder that she could survive, that she could taste luxury, even if she couldn't keep it. She was stirring the tea, watching the steam rise, when the air in the room shifted. It wasn't a sound, it was a pressure drop. The chatter of socialites died down, not all at once, but in a rippling wave of silence. A woman was walking toward Linda's table. She was in her 60s, but moved with the predatory grace of a jungle cat. She wore a Chanel suit that cost more than Linda's college tuition, and her silver hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon. But it was her eyes that froze Linda's blood. They were wide, darting, terrified. Without asking, the woman pulled out the chair opposite Linda and sat down. Linda froze her spoon, clinking loudly against the china. "Excuse me, I think you have the wrong—" "Don't look at the door," the woman hissed. Her voice was low, a jagged whisper of smoke and fear. She reached across the table, gripping Linda's wrist with fingers that felt like ice. 2 men. Leather jackets. They are waiting for me to leave alone. If I leave alone, they take me. Linda's heart hammered against her ribs. She instinctively glanced toward the entrance. 2 men stood by the hostess stand. They didn't look like hotel security. They looked like jagged rocks, wrapped in expensive suits. One of them, a man with a scar running through his eyebrow, was staring directly at them. "Who are you?" Linda whispered, trying to pull her hand away. "I am Isabella Scarlatti," the woman said. Linda stopped breathing. In Chicago, you didn't need to watch the news to know that name. The Scarlattis were the reason construction projects finished early and why certain judges never lost an election. They were royalty, but the kind that beheaded their enemies. Isabella reached into her purse. She didn't pull out a gun. She pulled out a ring. It was massive, a radiant cut yellow diamond surrounded by a halo of white stones set in platinum. It caught the dim light of the tea room and seemed to burn. "Put it on," Isabella commanded, her voice trembling but authoritative. "What a number, lady, I'm just having tea. My son is walking through those doors in 30 seconds. Isabella said, her eyes welling with tears that didn't quite fall. "Those men work for the Volkov Syndicate. They think I am isolated. They think the Scarlatti family is weak because my son has no heir, no wife, no stability. If they take me, they start a war that burns this city to the ground." She shoved the ring into Linda's palm. The metal was warm from Isabella's hand. "Put it on. When Alessio walks in, you are his fiancée. We are celebrating. If they see us celebrating, they will hesitate. They won't touch me with him here, not if he looks happy." "I can't lie to a mob boss," Linda hissed. "You aren't lying to him," Isabella said, her grip tightening until it hurt. "You are lying for him. Please, for the love of God, save my life." The desperation in the woman's eyes broke something in Linda. It was the same look her mother used to have before the end. Instinct overrode logic. Linda slid the ring onto her finger. It was a little loose, the heavy stone sliding to the side. "He's here," Isabella breathed. The double doors swung open. If the room had gone quiet for Isabella, it went dead for Alessio Scarlatti. He was tall, over 6'3", wearing a bespoke charcoal suit that fit his broad shoulders like armor. His hair was dark, swept back, and his face was a study in sharp angles and harsh lines. He didn't look like a man who smiled. He looked like a man who ended conversations. He scanned the room, his eyes dark, intelligent, and utterly cold, landing on his mother. Then they slid to Linda. He didn't look confused. He looked lethal. He walked toward them, his strides long and even. Linda wanted to run. She wanted to dive under the table. Instead, she straightened her spine. "Act like you belong," she told herself. "Act like the diamond is yours." Alessio stopped at the table. He didn't sit. He loomed. "Mother," he said. His voice was a deep baritone, smooth but vibrating with suppressed violence. "Why did the security detail tell me you slipped away?" "I wanted to surprise you, Alessio," Isabella said. Her voice was brighter now, fake and brittle. "And I didn't want to keep her waiting." Alessio's gaze snapped to Linda. It felt like being scanned by a weapon system. "Linda Isabella," said, gesturing to her. "Linda Mitchell. I told you I was meeting her. For the approval." Linda stood up. Her legs felt like jelly, but she forced a smile. She extended the hand with the ring. The diamond flashed aggressively. "Hi, Alessio," Linda said. Her voice didn't shake. A miracle. "Your mother has been telling me embarrassing stories about your childhood." Alessio looked at the hand, then at the ring. His eyes narrowed by a fraction of a millimeter. He recognized the ring. It was an heirloom. He looked at his mother, saw the sheen of sweat on her forehead, saw the two Volkov men by the door, shifting their weight, unsure of whether to advance. Alessio Scarlatti was many things, but he was not slow. He assessed the threat, the leverage, and the play in a single heartbeat. He turned back to Linda. The coldness in his eyes didn't melt, but his mouth curved into a smile that didn't reach his soul. "I hope she didn't tell you about the pony," Alessio said. He reached out, took Linda's hand, and pulled her close. Too close. She could smell him, sandalwood, gunpowder, and rain. He kissed her cheek, his lips warm but firm. "Play along," he whispered against her ear, too low for anyone else to hear. "Or I break your hand." He pulled back, keeping his arm around her waist, possessing her. He turned to the room, raising his voice slightly. "I suppose congratulations are in order," he announced. "My mother finally got her way." He looked directly at the men by the door. His stare was a challenge. "Come and take her now." The man with the scar hesitated. He tapped his earpiece, listened, and then turned around. The two men walked out of the hotel. Isabella let out a breath that sounded like a sob. Alessio's grip on Linda's waist tightened until it was bruising. "Smile," he commanded quietly. "We are leaving. You are coming with us." "I have work," Linda stammered. "Not anymore," Alessio said. "You're my fiancée now. We have a lot to discuss." The ride to the Scarlatti estate was silent. Not the peaceful silence of a library, but the heavy, suffocating silence of a bomb squad waiting for the timer to hit 0. They were in a black, armored SUV. Linda sat in the middle, Isabella on her left, Alessio on her right. The windows were tinted so dark that the Chicago skyline was just a gray blur. "Who are you?" Alessio asked. He didn't look at her. He was cleaning a smudge off his watch face. "I told you, Linda Mitchell. I know what you said. I want to know who you are. Who do you work for, Volkov the Irish? If you're a plant, I'll open this door and push you out on the highway." "Alessio," Isabella snapped. "She is a civilian. I pulled her off the street. It was an emergency." Alessio turned slowly to his mother. "You put the family ring on a stranger because you slipped your detail to go buy tea. Do you know how reckless that is? They were going to take me, Alessio. They had me cornered. I needed a witness. I needed a scene. So you engaged me to a nobody." Alessio turned his gaze to Linda. He looked at her worn boots, her fraying coat sleeves. "No offense." "Some taken," Linda muttered. She was terrified, but she was also angry. Anger was safer than fear. "I didn't ask for this. Your mother sat at my table. You can drop me off at the next corner. I'll give the ring back. I won't say a word." Alessio laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "You think you can just walk away? Volkov saw you. To them you aren't Linda the nobody anymore. You are the woman who wears the Scarlatti diamond. If I let you go, you'll be dead in an hour. They'll torture you to find out what you know about us, and when you tell them you know nothing, they'll kill you for wasting their time." Linda felt the blood drain from her face. "So, I'm a prisoner." "You're a guest," Alessio corrected, "with very strict house rules." The SUV slowed, turning through massive iron gates. The Scarlatti estate wasn't a house. It was a fortress, masked as a mansion. High walls, cameras everywhere, guards with assault rifles patrolling the perimeter. They pulled up to the main entrance. A man was waiting for them on the steps. He was younger than Alessio, with bleached blonde hair and a cruel smile. This was Dante Russo Alessio's underboss and oldest friend. Alessio opened the door and dragged Linda out by her elbow. "Dante!" Alessio barked. "Background check. Linda Mitchell, Chicago resident. I want to know where she was born, who she dates, and what she ate for breakfast in 1999. Now," Dante looked at Linda, then at the ring on her finger. His eyebrows shot up. "Boss, did you finally settle down?" "Inside," Alessio growled. They marched her into a library that was bigger than Linda's entire apartment building. Walls of mahogany books that looked like they hadn't been touched in a century, and a fireplace large enough to roast a whole pig. Alessio poured himself a drink amber liquid in heavy crystal. He didn't offer her one. "Sit." He pointed to a leather armchair. Linda sat. Isabella sat on the sofa looking diminished now that the adrenaline was fading. "Here is the situation," Alessio said, pacing in front of the fire. "The Volkovs are moving on our territory. They think we are weak because of the rumors about my health." "Your health?" Linda asked. "A bullet took a piece of my lung last year." "People talk. They think I'm dying. They think the family is fracturing. A marriage implies a future. It implies stability. It implies I plan to be around long enough to have heirs." He stopped pacing and looked at Linda. "My mother, in her infinite wisdom, has accidentally created a solution." "I'm not marrying you," Linda said, gripping the arms of the chair. "You aren't," Alessio agreed. "But you are going to pretend to. For 3 months. "Why 3 months?" "In 3 months, the shipment from Naples arrives. Once that clears, I wipe the Volkovs off the map. I won't need a shield anymore. Then we stage a breakup. You leave. I pay you." Linda stared at him. "And if I say no, then I open the front gate and wish you luck with the Russians." It wasn't a choice. It was an ultimatum wrapped in silk. "How much?" Linda asked. If she was going to sell her soul, she wanted a receipt. Alessio raised an eyebrow. He seemed impressed, or perhaps just amused. $500,000, deposited in an offshore account, plus expenses. 500,000. That was life-changing. That was student loans, a house, art supplies, safety. And my safety? Linda asked. After the 3 months, new identity, relocation, anywhere in the world. Alessio leaned in, placing his hands on the arms of her chair, trapping her. His face was inches from hers. She could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. But you have to sell it, Linda. You have to make them believe you love me. Can you do that? Can you look at a monster and pretend he's a man? Linda looked at him. She thought of the tea shop. She thought of the men in the leather jackets. She thought of her empty bank account. She reached up and adjusted his crooked tie. His breath hitched just for a second. I'm an artist, Alessio, she said softly. I know how to paint over the cracks. Alessio stared at her for a long moment. Then he pulled back, straightening his suit. Good, he said. Dante will show you to your room. Dinner is at 8. Wear something that doesn't look like you found it in a dumpster. He turned his back on her, dismissing her. But as Linda walked out of the library, guided by a smirking Dante, she looked back. Alessio was watching her reflection in the window. He didn't look like a man who had just solved a problem. He looked like a man who had just invited a different kind of trouble into his home. The game had begun. The next morning, Linda woke up in a bed that cost more than her parents' house. The sheets were Egyptian cotton with a thread count that felt like water against her skin. For a split second, she thought she was still dreaming. Then she saw the armed guard walking past her window in the garden below, and reality crashed back in. There was a knock at the door. Before Linda could answer, a team of 3 people swept in, led by a man with silver-rimmed glasses and a tape measure draped around his neck like a snake. Up, the man commanded. We have 4 hours to turn you from starving artist chic to mob royalty. I am Elias. Don't speak unless I ask for your measurements. Linda was pulled, prodded, and pinned. Racks of clothing were wheeled in silks, cashmeres, velvets. It wasn't just a makeover, it was an armor fitting. They dyed her hair a richer, glossier chestnut and applied makeup that made her cheekbones look sharp enough to cut glass. By noon, Linda stared at herself in the full-length mirror. She was wearing a structured emerald green dress that hugged every curve paired with diamond drop earrings that Isabella had sent up. She looked dangerous. She looked expensive. She looked like a stranger. The door opened, and Alessio walked in. He stopped. His eyes swept over her, starting at her heels and moving slowly up to her eyes. He didn't smile, but the air in the room seemed to get heavier. He waved a hand, dismissing the styling team. They scurried out like mice, fleeing a hawk. Better, Alessio said, closing the distance between them. You look the part. I feel like a doll, Linda replied, touching the heavy necklace at her throat. What happens now? Now we rehearse, Alessio said. He walked around her, circling her like a shark. Tonight the inner circle comes for dinner. My captains, my uncles. They are sharks, Linda. If they smell blood, they will attack. If they think you are a plant or a weakness, they will try to remove you. Remove me. Ideally with a check, realistically with a bullet. Alessio stopped in front of her. So tell me, how did we meet? Linda blinked. I don't know. You didn't tell me. Exactly. You need to improvise. If I give you a script, you'll sound rehearsed. Tell me the truth about something, and wrap the lie around it. Where do you feel most comfortable? Linda thought for a moment. The Art Institute. The Gallery of Impressionism. Good. Alessio nodded. 2 months ago, Tuesday afternoon. It was raining. I was looking for an investment piece. You were sketching. You critiqued my taste. I was intrigued by your boldness. I would never critique a man in a $3,000 suit, Linda argued. You would if you didn't know who I was, Alessio countered. He stepped closer, invading her personal space again. That is the key, Linda. You are the only person in my life who doesn't fear me. That is why I fell for you. You have to treat me like a man, not a boss. Can you do that? Linda looked up at him. He was terrifying, yes. But up close, she saw the exhaustion etched around his eyes. She saw the scar on his jawline. I can try, she whispered. Don't try. He murmured, his hand coming up to graze her cheek. His thumb rested near her lip. Do. For a second, the chemistry was real. It crackled between them, hot and electric. Then Alessio dropped his hand and stepped back, his face returning to stone. Dinner is in 10 minutes. Don't trip. The dining room was a cavernous hall, dominated by a long mahogany table. Seated around it were 12 men who looked like they had been carved out of granite. Cigars, heavy gold rings, and scars were the common accessories. When Alessio entered with Linda on his arm, the conversation stopped instantly. Gentlemen, Alessio said, his voice booming. Meet Linda, the future Mrs. Scarlatti. The silence lasted 3 seconds too long. Then a heavy-set man at the end of the table stood up. This was Uncle Salvatore, a man with a reputation for brutality that rivaled Alessio's. So, Salvatore grunted, walking towards them. This is the mystery girl, the one who made the Wolf of Chicago put on a leash. He grabbed Linda's hand, not to kiss it, but to inspect the ring. He squeezed her fingers hard enough to grind the bones together. Linda didn't flinch. She stared right into his watery blue eyes. Careful, Linda said, her voice cool and level. That hand paints my livelihood. If you break it, Alessio will be very upset. And you don't want to ruin his mood on a celebration night, do you? Salvatore's eyes widened. He laughed a wet, wheezing sound and released her hand. She's got a mouth on her, Alessio. I like that. Dinner was an interrogation. Between courses of risotto and veal, the questions came fast and sharp. Where are you from? Who is your father? What do you know about our business? Linda navigated the minefield. She stuck to the truth where she could, her art, her poverty framed as bohemian independence, her lack of family. When they asked about the business, she shrugged. I paint, gentlemen, she said, taking a sip of wine. I leave the numbers to Alessio. Honestly, it sounds boring. The table chuckled. They liked that. A wife who didn't ask questions was a good wife in their world. But then Salvatore leaned in. So the Art Institute, eh? You met looking at paintings. Which one? Alessio stiffened beside her. They hadn't picked a specific painting. Linda didn't hesitate. Paris Street, Rainy Day by Caillebotte. She lied smoothly. Alessio thought the perspective was cold. I told him it was just realistic. We argued for 20 minutes before he asked me for coffee to continue the debate. Alessio turned to look at her genuine surprise in his eyes. It was a perfect lie. The painting was about order detachment and the stark reality of the city themes that fit Alessio perfectly. She won the argument, Alessio added, squeezing her hand on top of the table. As she usually does. The tension in the room broke. The men laughed, raised their glasses, and accepted her. She wasn't an outsider anymore. She was the boss's weakness, and therefore part of the family. Later that night, as they walked up the grand staircase, Alessio stopped her on the landing. You did good, he said. It was the first compliment he had given her without a layer of sarcasm. I had to, Linda said, her adrenaline crashing, leaving her trembling. Uncle Salvatore looks like he eats people. He does, Alessio said seriously. But he liked you. That buys us time. He looked at her. Really looked at her, stripped of the performance. Why Kylabot? Because, Linda said, looking at the portrait of Alessio's father on the wall. It's a painting of people walking together but never touching. It felt appropriate. Alessio's jaw tightened. He stepped closer, the heat radiating off him. We are touching Linda. He reached out, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her neck, dangerously close to her pulse point. Linda's breath hitched. Go to sleep, he whispered roughly. Tomorrow we go to war. 2 weeks passed. The engagement was the talk of Chicago. Linda's face was in the social pages, usually blurred or from a distance, adding to the mystery. She learned the routine breakfast with Alessio, mostly silent reading of tablets, security briefings she wasn't allowed to hear, and evenings spent at events where she had to smile until her face hurt. But tonight was different. Tonight was the gala for the Children's Hospital, held at the Ritz-Carlton. It was neutral ground, which meant the Volkoffs would be there. Do not leave my side, Alessio instructed as they stepped out of the limousine. The flashbulbs of the paparazzi blinded them instantly. If you go to the bathroom, my guards go with you. If you get a drink, Dante tastes it first. You really know how to show a girl a good time, Linda muttered, smoothing down her midnight blue silk gown. It had a slit that went up to her thigh, concealing a slim holster strapped to her leg. Not that she knew how to use the gun, but Alessio insisted she wear it. Just in case, he had said. Inside the ballroom was a sea of diamonds and tuxedos, but the atmosphere was tense. The air felt thin. On the far side of the room, standing near an ice sculpture of a swan, was a group of men who looked like they were carving up the room with their eyes. The leader was a man in a white tuxedo, bold, arrogant. Victor Volkov. Stay calm, Alessio murmured, his hand firm on the small of her back. He's coming over. Victor approached them, holding 2 flutes of champagne. He was handsome in a cruel, sharp way, younger than Linda expected. Alessio. Victor smiled, his teeth too white. And the famous fiancée. Linda, is it? Ms. Mitchell to you? Alessio said, his voice dropping an octave. He didn't take the champagne. Feisty. Victor laughed. He turned his gaze to Linda. It felt like slime. You know, Linda, this city is dangerous for beautiful things. They tend to break. I'm not made of glass. Mr. Volkov, Linda replied, channeling every ounce of Isabella Scarlatti's haughtiness she had observed. I'm made of reinforced steel. I'm marrying a Scarlatti after all. Victor's smile faltered. Alessio's hand tightened on her waist, a silent signal of approval. A toast, then, Victor said, raising his glass. To the happy couple. May your union be short and memorable. He drank and walked away. He threatened you, Linda whispered, watching Victor disappear into the crowd. He threatened us, Alessio corrected. We're leaving. Now. Dante, bring the car around. They moved toward the exit, flanked by 4 guards. They bypassed the lobby and went straight to the private VIP exit in the underground garage. The concrete space was cold and echoed with the sound of their footsteps. Something's wrong, Linda said suddenly. Alessio stopped. What? The lights, Linda pointed. That row of lights above your car. They were buzzing when we came in. Now they're off. Alessio didn't question her. He didn't roll his eyes. He grabbed her arm and threw her behind a concrete pillar just as the air exploded. Boom! A van parked 2 spots away from Alessio's SUV detonated. The force of the blast knocked them to the ground. Car alarms blared a cacophony of screams and metal. Smoke filled the garage instantly. Stay down! Alessio roared, covering her body with his. Gunfire erupted. It was echoing from the ramp automatic weapons. The Volkovs hadn't just planted a bomb, they had set up an ambush. "Dante," Alessio shouted into his earpiece. "Status pinned down at the exit. 3 shooters." Dante's voice crackled barely audible over the gunfire. Alessio looked at Linda. Her face was smeared with soot, her eyes wide with terror, but she wasn't screaming. "Linda, listen to me," Alessio said, gripping her face. "I need to get to the trunk of the SUV. There's an assault rifle in there. I need you to stay here." "No," Linda said, grabbing his lapel. "Look." She pointed to the left through the smoke. In the reflection of a parked sedan's window, she could see a silhouette moving. A man was flanking them, creeping up behind the pillar where Alessio was exposed. "On your left," she hissed. Alessio spun around, drawing his handgun. The flanker stepped out, raising a shotgun. Alessio fired twice. Double tap to the chest. The man dropped. If Linda hadn't seen the reflection, Alessio would be dead. Alessio looked back at her, his eyes wild with adrenaline. "Can you run in heels? I can run barefoot," Linda said, kicking off her Louboutins. "Go. To the stairwell. Now." They sprinted. Bullets sparked against the concrete around them. Alessio fired back, covering her, moving, with a lethal precision she had only seen in movies. He took down another attacker near the elevator. They burst into the stairwell, the heavy steel door slamming shut behind them, muffling the chaos. Alessio didn't stop. He dragged her down 2 flights of stairs to the maintenance level, then pushed her into a utility closet, locking the door from the inside. It was pitch black. They were both panting, their breath ragged and loud in the small space. "Are you hit?" Alessio demanded, his hands roaming over her arms, her waist checking for blood. I don't think so," Linda gasped. I'm fine." The adrenaline was still coursing through them, turning fear into something else. Alessio was pressed against her, the space too small for distance. He could feel her heart hammering against his chest. "You saved my life," Alessio whispered. He sounded stunned. The reflection. "You saw him." "I told you," Linda said, her voice shaking. "I noticed details." Alessio stared at her in the dark. The faint light from under the door illuminated her face, dirty, terrified, and beautiful. "You aren't a civilian anymore, Linda," he said roughly. "You're in the war." "I want to go home," she whispered, a tear finally cutting through the soot on her cheek. "You can't," Alessio said. "Not tonight. Tonight they hunt." He leaned his forehead against hers. "I am sorry. I dragged you into this hell. Just get me out." Linda sobbed quietly. Alessio pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. It wasn't a performance. There were no cameras in the utility closet. He buried his face in her hair, inhaling the scent of smoke and her perfume. "I will burn the city down before I let them touch you," he swore. And for the first time, Linda realized the danger wasn't just the bullets. The danger was that she believed him, and worse, she felt safe in the arms of the monster who had put her there. The door handle rattled. Alessio pushed her behind him, raising his gun toward the door. The darkness waited. The door handle rattled again. A voice came through the steel, muffled but urgent. "Boss, it's Dante. Open up. We're clear." Alessio didn't lower the gun immediately. He waited for the code word. "The shipment," Alessio called out, "arrives on Tuesday." Dante replied instantly. Alessio exhaled, his shoulders dropping an inch. He unlocked the door. Dante stood there, his blonde hair plastered to his forehead, with sweat, his suit jacket torn. Behind him were 2 other guards looking grim. "We neutralized the shooters in the garage," Dante reported, eyeing Linda. "But we can't go back to the estate. They'll be watching the main roads. We need to go dark." "The lake house," Alessio commanded. Take the unmarked van." The drive was 3 hours north into the dense, pine-covered silence of Wisconsin. The lake house was a misnomer. It was a modernist fortress of glass and timber, hidden deep in the woods, accessible only by a single dirt road. When they arrived, the adrenaline crash hit Linda like a physical blow. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. "Dante, secure the perimeter," Alessio ordered. He turned to Linda. "Inside, upstairs. Second door on the left is the master. There are clothes in the closet." He didn't wait for her. He walked into the kitchen, gripping his left side. Linda showered, scrubbing the soot and smell of cordite from her skin until she was raw. She pulled on one of Alessio's oversized cashmere sweaters and walked downstairs. She found him in the kitchen, sitting on a stool, a first aid kit open on the counter. He was trying to stitch a gash on his side with one hand, his face pale and beaded with sweat. "You're hurt," Linda gasped. "You said you weren't hit." "A piece of shrapnel." Alessio grunted, failing to thread the needle. "It's shallow, just needs closing." "Give it to me," Linda said, stepping forward. "I can do it." "You're shaking, Alessio. Give it to me." She took the needle from his hand. His skin was burning hot. She cleaned the wound with alcohol. He didn't even flinch and began to stitch. Her artist's hands, trained for delicate brush strokes, were steady. "You have good hands," Alessio murmured, watching her work. "Steady. I used to fix my dad's work clothes when he came home torn up from the construction site," Linda said quietly, before he left. Why did he leave? Linda tied off the knot and snipped the thread. He found a new family. A better one, I guess. One that didn't struggle to pay the electric bill. He just vanished. She looked up at Alessio. People usually do when things get hard. Alessio caught her hand before she could pull away. "My father didn't leave," he said, his voice dark. "He was taken. Shot in front of a bakery when I was 12. I learned then that the world doesn't give you anything. It only takes. Unless you take it first." He looked at her, his dark eyes searching hers. The barrier between them, the contract, the money, the lie felt very thin in the quiet of the woods. "You should go back to Chicago when this is over," Alessio said, abruptly, letting go of her hand. "Take the money. Go to Paris. Paint. Forget you ever met me. Is that what you want?" Linda asked. "To be forgotten." Alessio stood up, wincing slightly. He walked to the window, looking out at the black void of the lake. "I am a cancer, Linda. Everyone close to me gets hurt. My father. My mother. Now you." Linda walked up behind him. She didn't touch him, but she stood close enough to feel his heat. "I'm not a victim, Alessio. I chose to put on the ring. And tonight, in that garage, you covered me. You protected me." Alessio turned around. The intensity in his gaze pinned her to the spot. "I protected my investment." "Liar," she whispered. Something snapped in him. He reached out, cupping her face with both hands, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones. "You are dangerous," he growled low in his throat. "More dangerous than Volkov." He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, a collision of fear and relief and pent-up desire. Linda melted into him, gripping his shirt, pulling him closer. For a moment there was no Mafia, no contract, no guns. Just the man and the woman and the fire consuming them both. He pulled back, breathless, his forehead resting against hers. "Linda, don't tell me to leave," she said fiercely. "Not tonight." "Okay," he breathed. "Not tonight." They slept in the master bedroom, not having sex, but tangled together under the heavy duvet. Alessio slept with his arm thrown over her waist, holding her like she was the anchor keeping him from drifting away. For the first time in 10 years, the Don of the Scarlatti family slept without a gun under his pillow. But peace in their world was just the eye of the hurricane. They returned to the estate 2 days later. The atmosphere had shifted. The failed ambush had made the Scarlatti soldiers paranoid. Every guard was doubled. Every window was shuttered. Alessio went straight to the war room. Linda was relegated back to the role of the decorative fiancée, but something had changed. When Alessio looked at her across the room, there was a secret shared between them. A tether. However, the reality of the situation was grim. "We have a leak," Dante announced in the library, pacing back and forth. Linda sat in the corner, sketching, pretending to be invisible. Isabella was there too, looking older and more frail than usual. "The Volkovs knew about the VIP exit," Dante continued. "That route was classified. Only the inner circle knew." "The inner circle is family," Isabella said sharply. "Are you accusing my brother or yourself?" "I'm accusing mathematics," Dante spat. "The probability of them guessing that exit is 0. Someone told them." Alessio sat behind his desk, staring at a map of the city. "Find the rat," he said coldly, "and bring them to me." Linda kept sketching, but her mind was racing. The inner circle, Salvatore, Dante, Isabella, and her. Later that afternoon, Linda was wandering the hallways. The house felt suffocating. She passed by Uncle Salvatore's study. The door was slightly ajar. She heard voices, hushed, angry. She shouldn't stop. She knew the rules. Curiosity killed the cat, and in this house, it killed the fiancé. But she heard her name. "The girl is the problem," Salvatore's gruff voice said. Linda pressed herself against the wall, holding her breath. "She's softening him," Salvatore continued. "He's hesitating. He didn't strike back immediately because he was worried about getting her to safety. She's a liability." Another voice answered. It was smooth, unfamiliar. "Victor is losing patience, Salvatore. You promised us the head of the Scarlatti family. Instead, we got a botched explosion." Linda's blood froze. Salvatore was talking to the Volkovs. "I told you the VIP exit," Salvatore hissed. "It's not my fault your men can't shoot straight. Look, the shipment is coming in Tuesday. Alessio will be at the docks personally to inspect it. That's your window. Take him out and I take over the family. We split the territory 50-50. And the girl? Kill her too. She's annoying." Linda clamped a hand over her mouth to stop the scream. She backed away slowly, her heart hammering so hard she thought it would crack her ribs. She had to tell Alessio. She had to warn him. She turned and sprinted down the hallway, heading for Alessio's office. She burst in without knocking. Alessio was on the phone, but he hung up immediately when he saw her face. "Linda, what is it?" "It's Salvatore," she gasped, locking the door behind her. "He's the mole. I heard him. He's working with Victor. They're planning to kill you on Tuesday at the docks." Alessio stood up, slowly. His face was unreadable. "You heard him?" "Yes, in his study. He was on the phone with one of Volkov's men. He said he gave them the VIP exit. He said he wants to take over the family." Alessio stared at her. For a terrifying second, he didn't say anything. Then the door behind Linda opened. She spun around. It was Salvatore. He was holding a stack of papers, looking calm, confused, and utterly innocent. "Alessio," Salvatore asked. "Is everything all right?" I could hear her shouting from the hall. "She says you're the mole, Uncle," Alessio said, his voice void of emotion. Salvatore looked at Linda with sad, pitying eyes. "Oh dear. I was afraid of this." "Afraid of what?" Linda demanded, stepping back. "Don't act innocent, I heard you." Salvatore sighed and walked to Alessio's desk. He placed the papers down. "Alessio, I didn't want to show you this until I was sure," But Dante ran the financials again. Alessio picked up the papers. His eyes scanned them and his expression darkened. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "What is that?" Linda asked, her voice trembling. "Bank transfers," Alessio said softly. He looked up at her, and the warmth, the connection, the love she thought she saw in the cabin, it was gone, replaced by the cold, dead eyes of the Mafia Don. From a shell company owned by Victor Volkov, into an account under the name Linda Mitchell. "What?" Linda screamed. "No, that's a lie. I don't have an offshore account. The deposit was made the day before the gala," Salvatore said smoothly. $500,000, the exact price for your betrayal. "I assume." "He's lying," Linda shouted, grabbing Alessio's arm. "Alessio, please. He forged them. Why would I be with you in the garage if I wanted you dead?" "To ensure the job was done," Salvatore said. "Or maybe you got cold feet. But the money is there, Linda. Black and white." Alessio pulled his arm away from her touch, as if she were acid. "Alessio!" Linda pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "Look at me. You know me. You know I didn't do this." Alessio looked at her. He looked at the woman who had stitched his wound, who had slept in his arms. And then he looked at the bank statement. In his world, trust was a weakness. Evidence was God. "Lock her up," Alessio said. "No," Linda screamed as Dante and another guard grabbed her arms. "Alessio, please. He's going to kill you Tuesday. The docks. Please believe me." "Get her out of my sight," Alessio roared, slamming his fist onto the desk. "Before I kill her myself." Dante dragged her out. Linda kicked and screamed, but it was useless. As the heavy oak door slammed shut, she saw Salvatore place a comforting hand on Alessio's shoulder. The wolf was in the hen house, and the only person who knew the truth was being dragged to the dungeon. Linda was thrown into a basement cell, a cold, windowless room used for interrogations. The door clanged shut, the lock engaging with a final thud. She sank to the floor, sobbing. Not because she was trapped, but because when Alessio looked at her, he hadn't seen a partner. He had seen an enemy. The betrayal didn't come from the mole. It came from the man she had fallen in love with. Tuesday arrived with a storm. The sky over Chicago was a bruised purple, heavy with impending rain. In the basement cell, Linda had lost track of time. She sat huddled in the corner, shivering in her torn evening gown. She hadn't eaten. She hadn't slept. She just replayed the look in Alessio's eyes, the absolute icy hatred over and over again. She heard the heavy bolts of the door slide back. Linda scrambled to her feet, bracing herself. She expected Dante coming to execute her, or maybe Alessio coming to do it himself. The door swung open. It was Isabella. The older woman looked pale, her hands trembling as she clutched a heavy keyring. Behind her, the hallway was empty. The guards were gone. "Mrs. Scarlatti," Linda rasped, her throat dry. "Isabella," the woman corrected sharply. She stepped into the cell and unlocked the cuffs that tethered Linda to the pipe. "We don't have much time. The shift change happens in 3 minutes." "What are you doing? Alessio thinks I'm a traitor." "Alessio is a fool," Isabella snapped, though her eyes were wet. "He is a man in love, and men in love are easily blinded by jealousy. I looked at the bank record Salvatore produced, the timestamp on the transfer. It was 4:00 p.m. on Tuesday." Linda blinked. "So, at 4:00 p.m. on Tuesday, you were with me in the garden, planting hydrangeas. You didn't have your phone. I had it in my purse because you didn't have pockets." Isabella grabbed Linda's shoulders. "You couldn't have made that transfer. I know it. And deep down, Alessio knows it too, but Salvatore has poisoned his ear." Salvatore. Linda's eyes widened. The docks, Isabella, tonight. Is the trap Salvatore is going to kill him. I know, Isabella said grimly. Alessio left an hour ago. He took Dante and a skeleton crew. Salvatore convinced him to leave the heavy guard behind, so as not to spook the supplier. We have to call him. He isn't answering. Salvatore has likely jammed the signal. Isabella pressed a set of car keys into Linda's hand. There is a Jaguar in the servants' garage. It's fast. You know where the docks are. Yes. Go, Isabella commanded. Save my son, and if you survive, try to forgive him. Linda didn't hesitate. She didn't think about the danger or the fact that she was unarmed. She ran. The Chicago Port Authority was a maze of rusted shipping containers and towering cranes. The rain was coming down in sheets, now turning the asphalt into a black mirror. Linda drifted the Jaguar around a corner, the tires screeching. She killed the headlights. Ahead, in an open clearing near the water's edge, she saw the convoy. 3 black SUVs. Alessio was standing in the rain, flanked by Dante and Salvatore. A large cargo container was open in front of them. Linda squinted through the windshield. She saw figures moving on top of the stacked containers. Snipers. She slammed her foot on the gas. The Jaguar roared the engine, screaming as she sped toward the group. "Alessio!" she screamed, though he couldn't hear her. At the sound of the engine, everyone turned. Salvatore's hand went to his waistband. Linda didn't stop. She aimed the car not at Alessio, but at the stack of crates behind Salvatore, where the snipers were positioned. She yanked the wheel at the last second, sending the car into a violent spin. The rear of the Jaguar smashed into the metal containers, shaking the foundation. The impact threw the snipers off balance. A shot went wide, sparking off the pavement inches from Alessio's boot. Chaos erupted. "Ambush!" Dante roared, shoving Alessio behind the cover of an SUV. Linda kicked open the crumpled door of her car and tumbled out onto the wet asphalt. Her head was spinning, blood trickling into her eye. "Linda." Alessio's voice cut through the noise of gunfire. He was staring at her from behind the SUV, shock written all over his face. "What are you doing here?" "It's a trap," Linda screamed, crawling toward him as bullets chewed up the ground around her. "Salvatore! It's Salvatore!" Alessio turned to look for his uncle. Salvatore wasn't taking cover. He was standing by the open container, a submachine gun in his hands. He wasn't aiming at the snipers. He was aiming at Alessio. "I'm sorry, nephew," Salvatore shouted over the storm. "But business is business." Salvatore pulled the trigger. Time seemed to slow down. Alessio was too far from cover. He couldn't move fast enough. Linda didn't think. She launched herself forward, not at Alessio, but at Salvatore. She tackled the older man's legs just as he fired. The stream of bullets went high, shattering the windows of the SUV. Salvatore roared in rage, kicking Linda in the ribs. She gasped, rolling away, winded. He leveled the gun at her. "Stupid girl!" Salvatore spat. "You should have stayed in the cellar." Bang! Salvatore's head snapped back. He crumpled to the ground, a single bullet hole in the center of his forehead. Linda looked up. Alessio stood there, his smoking handgun extended his face, a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. He didn't look at his dead uncle. He dropped the gun and sprinted toward Linda. "Linda." He skid to his knees on the wet pavement, gathering her into his arms. "Are you hit? Talk to me." "I think," Linda winced, clutching her side. "I think he broke my rib. Again." Alessio looked at her, at the blood on her forehead, the bruise forming on her jaw, the sheer, fierce determination in her eyes. The realization crashed into him like a tidal wave. She wasn't the traitor. She was his savior. She had driven into a firing squad to save him, even after he had thrown her in a cage. "Why?" Alessio whispered, his voice cracking. Rain mixed with the tears on his face. After what I did to you, why did you come back? Linda reached up her hand, shaking, and touched his face. Because you're an idiot, Alessio Scarlatti, and I couldn't let you die thinking I betrayed you. Alessio buried his face in her neck, sobbing. It was a raw, broken sound that no one, not Dante, not his enemies, had ever heard. I love you, he choked out. I love you, Linda. I am so sorry. Around them, Dante and the remaining guards were finishing off the Volkov mercenaries, but Alessio didn't care. He held her as if she were the only solid thing in a dissolving world. 3 months later, the weather in Lake Como was perfect. The water was a sheet of turquoise glass reflecting the mountains. Linda sat on the terrace of the villa, a sketchbook on her lap. Her ribs had healed, though she still had a faint scar on her temple, a souvenir from the docks. It's crooked, a voice said. Linda smiled and didn't look up. My drawing is perfect. Your face is crooked. Alessio walked into view. He looked different. Lighter. The perpetual scowl that used to etch lines into his forehead was gone. He wore a linen shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing the tattoo of a compass he had gotten last week. True North, it said. He sat on the edge of her lounge chair and took the charcoal pencil from her hand. Are you happy? He asked quietly. Linda looked at him. They had left Chicago. Dante was running operations back home, keeping the peace. Alessio had retired, or as retired as a Mafia don could ever be. They were ghosts to the world living under new names in Italy. I miss Chicago pizza, Linda teased. We can fly a pie in. I know a guy. I bet you do. Alessio reached into his pocket. He pulled out a ring box. It wasn't the massive yellow diamond from the tea shop. It was a simple, elegant band of platinum inlaid with tiny sapphires. I never asked you properly, Alessio said. He slid off the chair onto one knee. Linda's breath hitched. Alessio, you don't have to. I do, he interrupted. The first time I forced you, I used you as a shield. I made you a prisoner. I want to erase that. He took her hand. His grip was warm, firm, and familiar. Linda Mitchell, I am a man with a lot of blood on his hands. I don't deserve you. But I am selfish enough to want to keep you. Will you marry me for real this time? No contracts, no expiration date. Just us. Linda looked at the man who had been her captor, her enemy, and her lover. She saw the monster, yes. But she also saw the man who had held her in the dark, the man who had burned down his own empire to keep her safe. She took the charcoal pencil back from him. She grabbed his hand and wrote a single word on his palm. Yes. Alessio let out a laugh, a sound of pure joy, and pulled her into a kiss that tasted of sunlight and second chances. Back in Chicago, the legend of the tea shop girl was whispered in every bar. They said she was a witch who tamed the wolf. They said she was a ghost. But Linda wasn't a ghost. She was the queen, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't pretending. And that is the story of Linda and Alessio, from a desperate lie in a tea shop to a love that survived betrayal and bullets. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? If someone put a gun to your head and told you to pretend to be in love, could you do it? And more importantly, what happens when the pretending stops and the feelings become real? Alessio almost lost everything because he didn't trust the one person who was willing to die for him. It's a reminder that in love, just like in war, trust is the most dangerous weapon of all. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more Mafia romance twists and intense drama, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a part. Tell me in the comments, would you have forgiven Alessio after he locked you in the dungeon, or would you have taken the car and driven straight to the airport? Let me know down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.